A little bit about my personal background. I was raised in Canada, educated in Canada, got my PhD at the University of Toronto, and it was through my studies in astronomy, starting at age 7, that I realized the universe had a beginning. And if it had a beginning, therefore there must be a beginner. And I think I told people this morning I didn't meet Christians till I was 27. That's not entirely true. I did see 2 Christians from 30 feet away when I was 11 years old. And these were 2 businessmen that came into our public school, put 2 boxes on our teacher's desk, and left without saying a single word. But they were Gideons, and in those boxes were Gideon Bibles. And so I picked up a Gideon Bible at age 11. Didn't touch it till I was 17. And the reason why I waited so long, I didn't even think there was a God. But at age 16, because of my astronomy, realized there had to be a beginner behind the universe. And I was going to a public school that was filled with refugees from all over the world in Vancouver, British Columbia. We had every religion represented. And when people heard that I now believed in God, they started trying to proselytize me. And so that's when I began to collect all the holy books of the different religions and basically go through them. And the way I went at it was I said, if this book is from a human source rather than the one that created the universe, it will have the marks of human failings. There will be mistakes. There will be contradictions. And what I noticed is all these holy books tried to predict the future, but they all did it very poorly. But when I picked up the Bible, and I left the Bible to the very end, I noticed how different it was. It was clear. It was direct. It wasn't vague. It wasn't repetitious. It wasn't esoteric. And it was so detailed in what it said about history, geography, and science that it made it quite easy to put it to the test. Also, the best I found outside the Bible were the Mormon scriptures that predicted future events 50 different times and got it wrong on all 50 times. But when I picked up the Bible, I found over 3,000 places where it predicted future scientific discoveries and future historical events. It took me 18 months to put them all to the test, but when I did, I found the Bible didn't have a single provable error or contradiction. And that's when I decided to sign my name in the back of the Gideon Bible, committing my life to Jesus Christ. Now, having come to Christ in that kind of a spiritual vacuum, I didn't know how to find a good church. Canada is loaded with churches, but the vast majority of churches are filled with people that don't believe the Bible is the error-free Word of God. So I would go in, I would hear what was being said, and I would walk out. And in fact, it reached a point where I thought, I'm not going to find Christians in churches. I got to find them somewhere else. And when I was at the University of Toronto, I actually got the Toronto Star and went through the religion section, looked at all the ads, and I finally found some ads there that looked like that, these are churches that are really zealous about the Word of God. So I visited those churches, and they turned out to be cults. So I basically gave up on trying to find Christians. When I got my PhD, I wound up getting an appointment at Caltech to do postdoctoral research. And when I arrived at the astronomy department at Caltech, the place was loaded with Christians. You'd be amazed, some of the world's top astronomers are Bible-believing Christians. But I'll tell you something about those Bible-believing Christians in the astronomy department at Caltech. They would see me sharing my faith with my fellow astronomers who are not Christians. And I got to see some astronomers at Caltech come to Christ. But the ones who already were Christians, they would whisper to me, come into my office. When I was in the office, they would say, close the door. So I would close the door, then they would tell me they were a Christian, they would tell me what church they were going to, but they made me promise never to tell anybody else that they were Christians. And I said, why are you wanting me not to tell other people that you're Christians? And they said, because I'm not prepared. They were not prepared to give reasons for their faith. They'd been raised in Christian homes. And I can kind of see their point, because the atheists at Caltech were very aggressive. And you had to be very well prepared in order to effectively share your faith with them. And So I'm finding, as a pastor of a church near Caltech, that that's true of a lot of Christians. They don't share their faith because they're not prepared. They're worried what kind of questions and challenges they're going to get. They're worried they're going to be embarrassed. Well, I'll tell you what I share in our church. I say, God had the option of sending the angels to present the gospel to every non-Christian here on planet Earth. And they would have done a perfect job. They're sinless. God could have instructed them. They could have done a perfect job. For some reason, God told the angels not to interfere. They're not to share. God has given that mission to us human beings, even though he knows we're not all that well prepared, and he knows that we're in a sinful state. What impressed me when I read through the Bible at 17 and 18 is that becoming a Christian means committing yourself to do evangelism. Evangelism is not a gift. There are all kinds of spiritual gifts laid out in the New Testament. But what I notice is there is no spiritual gift of evangelism. We're all to do evangelism. By the way, there's no spiritual gift of hospitality. We're all to do hospitality. We do it through our spiritual gifts. And that's what made me hesitate to sign my name in the back of that Gideon Bible, because I realized if I sign my name in that Gideon Bible, I'm committing myself to share my Christian faith with whoever will listen. And so before I signed my name, I wanted to make sure I was prepared to do that very thing. And I'll tell you this, I worried about it way more than I should have. Because the moment I signed my name in the back of the Gideon Bible, it wasn't only a few days had gone by when my lab partner, my best friend in the physics department at the University of British Columbia, came up to me and said, Hugh, I've been going through a lot of struggles in my life. I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to somebody about God. Do you know anybody on this campus who knows anything about God? We talked for 4 hours that afternoon. He went on to become the chairman of the physics department at the University of Alberta. And he had many Christian graduate students who he very much had encouraged. God's in the business of sending people to those that are prepared. You've heard two of us now speak about 1 Peter 3:15. Always be ready to give reasons for the hope within you with gentleness, respect, and a clear conscience. But it also tells us from the words of Jesus himself, the workers are few. What I've experienced is what God did to Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. Notice how it records in the book of Acts, God performed a miracle to get the Philip right next to the Ethiopian eunuch. What I've learned as a pastor is if you will prepare good reasons for the hope within you, God will supernaturally bring people across your path whom he is prepared to listen to what you've got to say. And he'll bring people that are targeted, especially for your preparation. Now, as a pastor, a lot of people come to me and say, I don't have any miracles happening in my life. And I said, well, God performs a variety of miracles, but let me tell you one way that's guaranteed that you're going to see miracles in your own life. Prepare good reasons for the hope within you, and you'll watch God use you just like he used Philip to bring him to the Ethiopian eunuch. Let me give you a quick story, because this happens to me all the time. But let me just give you a quick story. I was in the San Francisco airport getting ready to go to Seattle, and I heard my name being called. Now, in America, that's not a good thing in an airport. That usually means you've been bumped off the flight. But I went up to the desk. The lady there said, do you mind if we put you in first class? And I said, well, I think I can tolerate that. And I've only flown first class twice in my whole life. So here I was in the first class seat, and a gentleman sat down beside me. And he also told me he never flies first class, but he's being flown in as a consultant for Microsoft, and they insisted on flying in first class. So here are two men who never fly first class that are sitting next to one another. So I asked him, well, what are you going to be doing at Microsoft? And he says, well, I'm a quantum physicist, and they're consulting. I says, well, that's interesting, astrophysicist, quantum physicist. And then he asked me what I did, And then when I told him, he said, well, you know, I'm an atheist skeptic. He was a German atheist skeptic quantum physicist sitting beside a Christian full-time apologist who's an astrophysicist. So I said, why are you an atheist skeptic? And he said, well, I guess the number one reason is there can't be a God because the universe is far too vast and Earth would just be simply, the universe is just such a waste if all this has been done just to make human beings a place to live. And I said, well, that's actually the first chapter in a book I just wrote, Why the Universe is the Way It Is. Chapter 1 is Why the Universe is So Big. So I kind of gave him the answer, and he said, well, I've got another problem. The universe just seems far too old. And I said, well, that's chapter 2. And then he said, you know, why would there be this incredible rate of entropy in the universe? And I said, well, that's actually chapter 8, so we talked about that. The bottom line, by the way, his demeanor was hostile at the beginning of our plane trip. By the end of the plane trip, all that was gone. And the thing he said to me as we got off the plane, it's no accident that the two of us were sitting together. He took a copy of my book and he said, do you have anything in German? Well, I happen to have my DVD, Journey Toward Creation, and it's in German, so I gave him the German copy. Now, I don't normally have that in my briefcase, but I'm just telling you that. God will work incredible miracles. Now, when you see that once, you say sheer coincidence. But when you see it 100 times over the course of 1 year, you know it's not a sheer coincidence. One reason why we're here, we want you to experience those kinds of miracles. And what we're trying to do is give you the best reasons that we've seen that will be attractive to unchurched people. People who have not been exposed to church, don't know Christians, haven't read the Bible. Our research is trying to target what are the best evidences, the best reasons that we can present to those kinds of folks. So, and I think as you've heard me say already, we have discovered that it's much easier to engage people about brand new evidences for the Christian faith. And that's the wonderful thing about being alive in the 21st century. Literally every day as we read the scientific literature, dozens of discoveries are being made that give us more evidence for the Christian faith. Now, I don't expect you to be reading the scientific literature. We read it for you. And we publish articles, we do podcasts that are designed to be used by the lay people. And what we're really trying to do is give you water-cooled ammunition. So when you're at the water cooling, say, are you aware of what's just happened? And it's a wonderful way to get people engaged. And you can count on us to back you up in terms of where the citations are and people who want to dig a little bit deeper than that. The challenge we're facing is that we have great receptivity in secular society. But believe it or not, our biggest challenge is in the church. For some reason, the church has this fortress mentality, the idea that we're under assault from secular society and we need to shield ourselves from the attacks of that evil world that's out there. But again, as a minister of the gospel, what I see in the gospels is that Satan is in the fortress, and he's commanding us to go out and assault his fortress. We're not to withdraw from society. We're not to attack them. I run into a number of apologists and creationists who have an attack mode towards secular society. In fact, I debated a gentleman just a couple of nights ago on one of your TV shows, and he had the perspective that the scientific community is allied in a vast conspiracy to deceive the public. And so he really kind of attacks the scientific enterprise. Well, what we need to do is engage. We must not withdraw. We must not attack. We must engage. Because God has promised us that he will make disciples of every people group. And that includes astrophysicists. That includes biochemists. It even includes politicians and lawyers. All groups will be brought to faith in Jesus Christ. And therefore, we need to shed that fortress mentality. We also need to stop fighting one another. One of the things I've noticed is when you bring up the topic of creation, Christians immediately get into a fight. God has called us to be ambassadors to bring a world to peace with Jesus Christ. We are ambassadors called to bring them to peace with him. One of the ways that's going to be demonstrated is if we can make peace with one another. And what I see in the Christian community, you got the theistic evolutionists, you got the young earth creationists, you got people like ourselves, the day-age creationists. Can't we all get along? These are not doctrinal issues. You will not find the age of the earth in any of the doctrinal creeds of the church. We need to stay united on the crucial points. And that's what I love about the creeds, especially the Reformation creeds. As long as they are, stick to the essentials. We need unity there, and we need the freedom to engage one another. And what I long for within the church is a free market exchange of ideas, where we can lay out our different creation models, but lay it out in such a way that we compete with one another and may the best model win. And by the way, none of us has, quote, the perfect model. All of our models have limitations. None of us can claim to have a perfect, complete model. But if we have free market competition in a spirit of Christian charity, we can all build better models with more complete explanation and use those models to reach a world for Christ. I've said enough. What I want to do is kind of open it up for any questions you care to raise on any apologetic issue. And by the way, one feature we offer at Reasons to Believe is we've had a thing called I Didn't Know That. You can ask us any question, and we answer a lot of them live on our program, or our webcast, but we actually answer every question we get. You say, how can you possibly answer those thousands of questions? Well, Reasons to Believe is an organization of 33 paid staff and 3,000 volunteers. It's our volunteers that do the bulk of the outreach. And incidentally, we'd love it if you would become part of our volunteer team. We have a program called Reasons Institute. It's online courses that equip you to speak and teach and write blogs, newspaper articles, whatever. And those are all available through an online program on our website at reasons.org. So if you just simply look for Reasons Institute, you can get, by the way, if you want to get graduate credit for those courses, we have accreditation through a number of institutions. We don't make any money on that, but you got to pay them for the accreditation process. But we discovered most people just want the education. They want the training. And by the way, our online courses are set up where it's fully interactive. You get to interact with students literally all over the world. And that to me is really fun. We have chat rooms where you can discuss these kinds of issues with people in Japan, Australia, China, Eastern Europe, as well as America and here in Britain. So feel free to take advantage of that if you'd like to get more seriously involved in the ministry of apologetics. With that, I'd like to open up to any questions that you might have. And hey, I'm going to repeat the question, and if I don't get it right, you tell me if I didn't get it right, okay? Yes?
I'm not sure it's actually a question, but you were talking about evolution, and one of my friends was hiding from someone who asked her the reason to believe. She said, well, I didn't know the answer, to tell her, whether I believe in a God. And the Holy Spirit spoke to her and said to her, okay, throw some coins, so actually do the same. Yes, he threw some coins down. When she threw the coins down, everything just like a big bang. But she said, if you take the coin and you put it like this, it will actually stay in place. So she was actually, she came to the conclusion that it has to be a design. Someone who's greater than just a big bang. So just something to share and about on the question of evolution.
Okay, good. Yes.
How do you reconcile the hell and the God of love? And what would you say? How do you reconcile the existence of hell with a God of love? And what would you say about John Stott's view that there isn't hell, there is annihilation?
Okay. The question she's asking me, could I comment on John Stott's view that since God is love, there can't be, I got 5 minutes left? Oh boy, okay. That question will probably take 5 minutes, but I'll try to be quick so we can get another one in there. How do I reconcile a God of love with the doctrine of eternal torment in hell? That actually came up in the last session, and it's addressed in some detail in the book we have on the table called Beyond the Cosmos. But let me give a quick answer to that. 1 John tells us that God is love. Everything he does is an expression of love. I take that to mean that even the torment in hell must be an expression of God's love. And when I said in the session before, God doesn't send anybody to hell. People go to hell because they want to go to hell. You get to choose where you get to spend eternity. And the choice is this: are you prepared to submit to the authority of the creator of the universe for the rest of eternity? If that's the desire of your heart, heaven's the place for you. But if you look at submission to the authority of God as the most repugnant thing you could possibly think of, then God's got another place for you. The problem with going to the lake of fire is that everybody else that's there also has the same mindset that you have, that they would not want to submit to God's authority. And moreover, in this life, people in rebellion against God nevertheless are restrained by God's Holy Spirit from performing all the evil that they would like to do. But God gives people in hell what they want: complete freedom from his Holy Spirit restraint. And God knows that that means that the people in hell are going to damage one another. And so what he does to prevent hell from becoming a worse place than it otherwise would be is he imposes torment on each individual in proportion to the evil that they have committed. So Albert Schweitzer, for example, will get a lot less torment than, say, a Joseph Stalin or an Adolf Hitler. Why? Because one has much more potential to make life much more miserable in the lake of fire than the other individual would be. Now, an analogy I gave, it's both in the book and I gave in the last session, was a friend of mine who is a missionary that got arrested, and he was put in a cell. He got arrested for something that was not a crime at all, but it took a long time to process the paperwork, so he spent a night in a jail cell with 8 homosexual rapists who threatened to rape him if he fell asleep. So he said, I spent the entire night with my back against the wall, just fearing for my life. And he said, at that moment I was saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if the police would come into our cell and handcuff and leg cuff all of us? He said, that would be torment, but it'd be a lot less than not being handcuffed and leg cuffed. So I think there's an analogy there for what God does in hell. He imposes just enough torment upon each individual to prevent that individual from making conditions much worse. Because the worst thing about hell is the company you keep within hell. The virtuous go on to heaven. Those intent on rebellion against God go to the lake of fire. Okay, one more question, and then we're going to have to close it out. I think you had your hand up? No? Okay.
Just going back to your first session where you were talking about, arguing from the cosmology of the expanding universe and the singular universe, how do you then bring in any discussion about the fact that God could catastrophically wind it all up? How does that fit the model?
Okay, how does the end of the universe fit my model that I explained in the session here about how God is continuously expanding the universe from the cosmic creation event? There are 3 passages in the Bible. You'll see them in Peter and Isaiah and Revelation, that the universe will end by God wrapping it all up like a scroll and it'll disappear in a fiery heat. As astronomers, I read that sounds like the universe disappearing into a singularity. That would be a good way to describe it. And there actually are models, Big Bang creation models, that predict that the universe would end exactly that way. So, for example, we now know that the universe can be described as a 10-dimensional flat sheet. And it's flat as far as we can see. But we can't see the full extent of the universe because we're looking at the universe of the past. And the universe of the past is smaller than the universe of today because the universe is undergoing continuous expansion. So it's possible beyond the point where we can't see that the universe might actually fold in on itself, and so that the sheet would go like this and come back on top of it. So that you'd have two sheets separated by one another. And in that kind of a universe, a space-time quantum fluctuation in the top sheet could make contact with a space-time quantum fluctuation in the bottom sheet, then the entire sheet would disappear into a singularity, and that would be the end of the entire universe. How close do the sheets have to be? About 1 millimeter apart for there to be a 50% probability of that happening in less than 20 billion years. And there's other models too, but that's an example of the simplest model that would actually predict in a literal fashion those Bible passages. Although some Bible scholars take those passages as metaphorical. What's interesting to me as an astrophysicist, they can be interpreted literally in the context of what we know about Big Bang cosmology. And keep in mind, the Bible predicted Big Bang cosmology first. Okay, we got to cut things off because the program continues, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of today. Thank you.